Hello and welcome to part 2 of a 3-part series on acting strategically. I'm Steve Alley, a consultant with Ekstrom & Associates. In part 1 of this series on acting strategically, I talked about what makes an effective strategic plan and what can derail that effort. In this part of the series, I'll describe the acting strategically process, which takes your current actions and uses those to create strategy. In the final segment of the series, I'll take you through how to prioritize, reprioritize, and reshuffle that work if need be. Let's look at this typical strategic plan and what happens with this. In a typical strategic planning process, you develop a vision for where you want the organization to go. You look at the mission, the goals, and the activities. In the acting strategically process, this is a process where you go from the bottom up, where you look at what you're doing and then look at your goals and your mission and your vision to see whether you are actually aligned with what you're trying to do. Now, I want to spend just a second to talk about language here. I know oftentimes when people talk about in a strategic planning process a goal, a strategy, or objective, they use those kind of words, or they talk about activities or tactics or strategies. Those can be used interchangeably depending on the process that you have used to develop your plan. But I want to simplify this. What we're really looking at is the bottom row on this chart is your activities, and the second row your goals. Your activities are what you're doing, your goals are what you're trying to accomplish. And it's as simple as that, and that's what you're trying to be able to look at. And what you're really trying to determine here is the answer to this question. What does what you do say about who you are? This is really the key, I think, for any community foundation, because oftentimes foundations believe that they are acting in a certain way when in fact their actions show them to be a different kind of organization. And so what this acting strategically process is intended to do is try to help you realign that if it's out of whack, or confirm that you're doing exactly what you're trying to be able to do. You want to be thoughtful and intentional in your actions. If you are, your odds of effectiveness really shoot through the roof. I think you want to look for what former Kellogg Foundation Vice President Bob Long calls the simple, elegant solution. And that's what we're really trying to develop here. By the way, the process that we're talking about here really isn't intended to replace a full-blown strategic planning process. It may help you examine what you're doing in a way that enables you to either identify potential new strategies or what needs to be changed to get back on track if that's what you in fact end up doing. So let's talk about the acting strategically process. It's really a number of steps. The first is to look at what you're currently doing, then prioritize the work, set or confirm the goals that you're looking at, define the work more clearly, developing some accountability measures, and then bringing it all together. In this session, we're going to basically talk about the first two of those steps in the process. Now at this time you should have at your place an acting strategically activities worksheet that has the following ideas or the following headings on it. If you don't have one, you can certainly make one up, leave some space in between each one of these. For programs, asset development, fundraising and public relations, board development, governance and volunteer management, management in general, other. And then the final one is a question about any activities your organization should be engaged in that it isn't currently doing. What you're really trying to do is specifically identify what is the work you are actually doing. How are you spending your time in each one of these areas? As board members doing this, look at certainly how you spend your time for the foundation. How much of it are you spending on governance, for example, in meetings versus being out doing asset development, for example, or how involved are you in the program piece of it, in giving away the money. Staff, it's the same kind of issue. You want to look at how you're spending your time in each one of those areas. So using this sheet, you really want to look at what are you currently doing. This is really the answer to this first part of this process is list the activities your organization is currently engaged in, whether strategic or not. Now, I want you to get even more specifically. List the activities you are engaged in as a board member or as a staff member. There may be a wide range of things that you're actually doing, and you want to try to capture all of those within those particular areas that you have that are listed on that sheet. Estimate the percentage of time that each one takes. Again, it's a pretty simple calculation. This is not rocket science. I'm not asking you for exact numbers, but give me an idea, give yourself an idea of how much time you're actually spending on each one of the areas. And then, is there something that you're not doing that you think you should be doing? Something maybe you've talked about as a board or staff that really you think, boy, if we could do this, this would really push our agenda forward. All of those are the questions that you need to ask yourself as you're going through this first portion of this worksheet. So what I'd ask you to do is to spend a few minutes doing that. You can do it either individually or as a group if you'd like. But at this point, if you want to pause the video, and we'll wait and then come back. When you're ready, just restart it, and then we'll come back for the next part of this. Okay, now let's do the second phase of this work. Hopefully that's helped you. The first phase is I helped you identify what you're doing and maybe what some of the gaps are. Let's talk about how you now prioritize this work. And there really are a number of questions that I want you to answer in this. Now that you have that list in front of you, if you could only do one thing, what would that be? Why did you choose that? Think about that. Have a discussion about why that particular thing. And this might be interesting if you did this individually, actually, and then came back together as a group. What would your next two priorities be? What would be number 2 and 3 on that kind of must-do list? And then I think the question you have to ask yourself is, why are you doing everything else? So again, I think at this point you want to pause the program here while you're doing this piece of the work, and then we'll come back for the final segment of this, which is a few questions for you to think about as you go in and as we begin to think about part 3 of this, which will be really putting this all together. So again, pause the player here, and we'll come back together here in a few minutes. Now we're on to the final part of this particular piece of it, and I wanted you to spend just a few minutes now talking about these questions. What did this process say to you about the work you're doing? What percentage of your current work is strategic? And that was kind of what's the one thing you must do kind of question. How can you increase that percentage? Because part of what this is about is saying, do we need to shift our priorities or our time to make sure that we're doing the right things to continue to advance us forward as an organization? Was there anything about this that surprised you? For example, the amount of time that you spent on a particular activity, something else perhaps. What must you start doing or stop doing tomorrow? How are you going to get to what matters most in the work that you're doing? This concludes part 2 of this 3-part series of Acting Strategically. In part 3 of the series, we'll be talking more specifically about how to prioritize and reshuffle the work, and building some accountability measures into the work so that you can actually, in fact, make the steps that you'd like to make. Thank you.